So Craig did the backstory, if you like, with it. I'm not going to blast you with a load of stuff about Parkour Earth because I'd rather use the time much more constructively to find out what you want to know and what information I can share, whether that is specifically about Parkour Earth, whether it's about global sport in politics, or whether I can do a backflip, which I can do, by the way, despite my physique. I can do it. So you don't need to put that question in the box. Don't need to. Do it. No. No warm-up. No warm-up. Yeah, that's what happens. So yeah, Parkour Earth, as Craig has outlined, was established in July of this year. And it was based on an accord that was reached by 6 national federations. So Parkour UK, Fédération de Parkour, Australian Parkour Association, New Zealand Parkour Association, the Polish and South Africans as part of that. So we all came together. Leading up to that, there was intense sort of debate, and that was born out of the common unity that was shown in the face of FIG blatantly encroaching upon our sport and our communities. So from that common unity that came out, there was clear consensus between a number of national federations to come together to sort of tackle that issue. So primarily, we came together as national federations federating. Now that sounds simple, but it's an important point. You cannot establish an international federation unless you have national federations that federate as part of that. It's just plain common sense. It's logical in terms of that, how it works. Secondly, it was formed on the principles of good governance in terms of that. Sport globally is under the microscope around the lack of governance across the piece. Whether that's sport integrity, whether that's betting, whether that's corruption, whether that's just basic stuff like terms of office. You know, a lot of international federations don't have terms of office for their presidents. You know, some of them have been around for 12, 15, 18 years, you know, a long time, running an international federation of sport in terms of that. So that's how Parkour Earth was established and sort of came together. And then obviously, fulfilling our founding principle of good governance, we joined the Sport and Integrity Global Alliance, or SIGA, as part of that. Now it's telling, as I just said around the state of international sport, that an organisation like SIGA had to be set up, or has been set up, to tackle these issues in sport globally, because the issues that are happening in sports governance aren't isolated to what's happening with us and FIG. Sport generally has these issues. They've been around for a long time, and they need tackling in terms of that. That's why one of the key principles of setting up Parkour Earth from scratch with a blank sheet of paper was to make sure we instill those things right from the outset. So integrity, transparency, accountability, making sure the community can understand, engage, and hold the organisation to account and ultimately control the organisation. That's what it's there to do. So we've done a lot of work behind the scenes and continue to do some. There is going to be some further announcements early part of next week. So some of that is going to be related to the FIG situation as part of that. And there's a few other bits that will be announced in terms of what we are doing in terms of the global sports scene and how we are spreading the word around what we are doing. My role, yes, I've been involved in parkour for many years, probably as long as going back as when I had hair. So it tells you how long I've been involved. I also work across sport generally, some international federations that I advise, some smaller ones, national federations and other bits. So I've got a good understanding of the sporting landscape. So that's sort of a bit backstory back to me and Parkour Earth. Now it's over to you guys. So I want to make sure that you get out of this session what you want. There's no such thing as a stupid question. These questions must be asked and should be asked. I will do my best to answer those. I don't claim to have all the answers, and I will give you an honest account of how I see things, or how we see things as Parkour Earth as part of that. So if you want to ask things specifically about Parkour Earth, please do so. If you want to ask some things about Parkour UK, please do so. If you want to ask some things about me, it's cool. I'm an open book. I'm here for you guys to get the answers that you want and that you need as a community, so that we can move forward to make sure we protect the sovereignty, integrity, and cultural identity of our sport and our activity.
So one of the things I mentioned was global versus national. And I think one of Parkour UK's actual stated missions is to assist other nations. Like they were talking about that at the beginning, of creating a good governance model and to assist other entities to come up in the national context. So one question I have for all of you is, what's the balance of what you're interested in doing in the next hour? U.S. organization, because he's a wealth of information from the U.S. scope, but it's also a little different because it's British versus American. I don't know if we're going to have an argument about tea. So are people interested more in the national level or the
We can just
global?
mix and blend. I'm happy to
Don't
take
care
most.
at all. Awesome. Okay. So we had a debate whether we want to sit down, and we kind of decided we're too antsy to sit. So I have a bunch of questions that I came up with, that my team came up with, and then I have some that were emailed in, and then a couple from the bin. So don't hesitate to write more down. We pulled a bunch of dupes. I had like 3 of the same kind of question. So let's just go right at the IOC stuff, because that's like a big, the enemies at the gate kind of thing. And first question that I'd like to know is, does Parkour Earth plan to be involved in competitions in terms of organizing them and setting up the specifications of how they would be run?
Part of that is a preloaded question in terms of that. So the Constitution or the statutes or the Memorandum and Articles of Association of Parkour Earth provide the framework for that to happen. However, it's very clear how we set up as an international federation. That decision must be made by the community. So it won't be taken by Parkour Earth. What will happen is, if that question is posed, if the community say that they want this, or the opportunity arises, we would then put that out.
What's the actual, is there an actual mechanism in place? So
Yes, so that will go to Congress or annual general meeting.
Like literally, I have an idea, I'm in Idaho and I think we should be working on this. Do I have to have a national level that I can communicate with so that they can speak? So the question I have is, if it's a federation, then that means that the United States has no voice.
Yet.
I'm not complaining, I'm just saying, Parkour Earth, we have no voice. Which is a whole nother discussion, which I think you're talking about that tomorrow, right? We're talking about
good governance
concepts for forming national entities.
Yes,
So
yeah.
one of the first things that we have to do is get our house in order if we want to actually participate in governance at the global level.
So just to unpick that a little bit, within the Parkour Earth Constitution, you've got 3 levels of membership. So you've got associate, you've got affiliate, and you've got full member. So affiliate and full members are national federations, if you like. Associate members are those that are trying to form national federations so that they can join and get the support of Parkour Earth to do that. With that, they have to have the same powers. The only powers that they don't have is the power of vote. That's the only difference. They can nominate, they can, talk, they can speak at Congress, other bits, put ideas forward and other bits with that. So we've tried to build a framework as inclusive as possible. At the same time, you've got to go back to that guiding principle around national federations federating to form an international federation. So you've got to have that flexibility within there to do that. But in short, around the Olympics, the Constitution provides the framework for that to currently happen. Parkour Earth would not take a unilateral decision for that to happen. It must go to membership, and membership must vote on that.
So how does the balance, if you know a lot about, I don't know if you know, we have problems with our electoral college, and it's a balance between population density, and the problem with it is rural areas get rolled under because their density isn't high enough to get them enough votes. So how does the balance of power work within the Parkour Earth Congress? Like you have Micronesia versus the United States versus China. Like how do you balance that out?
Completely the same. So it's one national federation, one vote. Yeah. So it's very, very simple. Now, the other thing to think about in the whole concept of this is what's currently been put in place is a framework. There is the first annual general meeting, or the first Congress, is being held early 2018. It was one of the transitional arrangements that we put in. The first annual general meeting will be held with 210 days of incorporation. During that period, member organizations can put forward changes and amendments to the Constitution. It's the members that change the Constitution. If things need changing or people want to propose changes, that can be done.
So to me, that balance, that's a big deal. I mean, there's 450, how many people in the United States? 400 million people here, and 310. 350? 300 million? I always like to say, what language is spoken on Earth? Chinese. Most people are Chinese, right? So this means that Micronesia or France gets the same vote as China. Was that something that you guys addressed? Were you involved in the actual writing of the Constitution, or was that?
Yeah, absolutely. We did it from top to bottom, blank sheet of paper in terms of that, and it was all built on a very simple premise around instilling that good governance. It makes sense currently around.
Single unit assembly.
Yes, yeah, in terms of doing that. If membership or national federations at time decide that there needs to be a weighting to that, they should do that. But again, these are not things for me to decide. They're things for members to nominate.
What, two things at once. Let's go this way. What aspects of parkour, if any, and actually let's back up a step. I would like to hear your unpacking of, I always say little p, big P, ADD, and free running.
Yep.
And I hate to be mean, but I usually just kind of go free running. Like, I don't want to be mean, but it's not that big of a deal. Let's just solve the parkour AD issue. So how do you see that playing out? Do you really do you have this vision that you think we can manage to pull the schism back together somehow? Or?
Absolutely, there's no reason why not. In terms of that, the schism's there. It's always been there. I'm close enough to the founders to know why that schism is there. In terms of that, a lot of that is personal reasons. These are young men that grew up with each other and have various different issues with each other for various different things. Yes, yeah, that's where it is. Both for Parkour UK and for Parkour Earth, it's very clear that we use the collective term parkour to represent parkour, freerunning, and ADD. As part of that, they all are part of the same family. How those 9 individuals see that schisms between that, or the community see the schisms between that, is a strength. You know, that's us, that's our diversity. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us culturally rich in terms of what we've got. This isn't about separating or putting things into nice, neat boxes. If anybody reads the Parkour Earth Constitution, we spent a lot of time defining it. The definition was broadly based on what Parkour UK had done, because that has been an accepted definition as part of that across the United Kingdom. So that gives us a precedent of which to move forwards to. That said, there was more tweaks put into that. And then also it really brings in the other aspects, the arts, the cultural sort of bit. So one of the clauses that are in there very clearly states that while parkour is a sport, it's not just a sport, it's much, much more than that. And again, Parkour Earth does not only work in the sporting sphere, works across cultural spheres and other bits around that as well, because we've got lots and lots to offer. Again, it's that depth and breadth in terms of what we got.
Tangent that I'm interested in personally. Do you have any plans, infrastructure, thoughts, like official thoughts from the entity, not your personal thoughts, but thoughts that relate to using Parkour Earth as a vehicle to solve problems like countries that have poor track records on individual rights or gender biases? Do you see Parkour Earth being used as a tool to sort of, the reason I'm bringing it up is it was one of David Bell's ideas, was that he wanted to try and serve those areas and actually use parkour to help people.
Absolutely. You've only got to look at the work, and I can speak from a Parkour UK perspective around, again, that depth and breadth in terms of stuff that it does in terms of deprived communities, what it does with older people, what it does with people with disabilities, you know, a whole range of different things. Stuff that we do in the arts, stuff that we do in the esports space, stuff that we do in videography, photography, you know, it transcends sport in terms of what we're doing. And unfortunately, a lot of the debate that's happening at the moment is always framed around this nice little neat box that's called sport, and it's all based on traditional sport. We often sit in and around and outside of that, and that's where a lot of the magic or the cultural sort of aspects happen, is outside that nice little neat box that's called sport. And some of the stuff that we've done, particularly in the UK, is around pushing the boundaries of that box and blurring the boundaries of that box. But to go to your point, a lot of it is around, yes, you can use parkour, freerunning, ADD for a number of different things in terms of that. So whether that's around social change, whether that's around human rights or other bits and pieces with it, you can do it. And we've all seen, or most of you would have seen, you know, parkour is touched, you know, many parts of the world, you know, Gaza, all sorts of different places as well. So.
Partly I'm jumping around because questions I have in mind and questions I think might lead us to more questions. So some of these are a little like esoteric. So it's an entity, it's got offices. Where does the money come from to actually operate Parkour Earth? How does it raise its funds? And, you know,
so Parkour Earth, very simple. It's being split 1/6 between all of the national federations that are currently in. There will be no decisions made on things like sponsorship or membership fees or anything like that until the first annual general meeting. It should be for the members to debate, discuss, and decide that, and set the framework around it.
That explicitly locks out commercialization, like commercialization of like you know, Nike can stamp something, so Parkour Earth could stamp something and then get remuneration in exchange for that. Is there verbiage that explicitly prevents that type of commercialization?
No, not within the Constitution, not yet. Within that, and again, that's something for the members to debate, decide. I think where we are at this stage is around onboarding national federations, dealing with the fig issue in terms of doing that. So they're the two primary goals that we're doing leading up until AGM in early 2018, when hopefully we'll have a lot more national federations, more plurality, more people come to the table. We can elect new directors and start making some decisions if and around that on those sorts of
Do
things.
you happen to know off the top of your head, no is a valid answer, what the actual budget is for PE for any particular fiscal year?
No, so we don't have a budget because we've set up in terms of that. So the operational costs is basically the incorporation and expenses for things that we're doing. So we've taken out membership with SIGA as part of that. So that's a couple of $100 that we had to pay, or euros. So we had to pay that.
Extremely thin.
Yes, yeah, in terms of that.
So like if there's a pile of money, here comes the crush.
No. So currently we're in the process of setting up a bank account, and the basis on we're setting up the bank account is there'll be 3 signatories on the account in terms of that, and it will be published all in line with good governance requirements. So annual accounts will go out; they will be public as part of that. That's a requirement of good governance. In terms of there's a basic level in the UK, and then there's the sports code of governance that we have to publish full details of things like remuneration, expenses, all the other bits and pieces. So you get a lot more information.
Completely random one that I think is fun. If you could have everyone in the room do one thing, Tracy wrote this. If you could have everyone in the room do one thing related to parkour, that's one question. One thing related to Parkour Earth, what would it be?
Parkour, we need to become organized. This is the big thing. We need to start putting aside the badges that we wear, or the teams that we train with, or what we do, and start realizing we are a community. We talk community. We talk a good game about being a community, but we don't yet walk the walk about being a community in terms of doing that. We've got a serious encroachment issue. I picked this up early on, even before it was in the public domain, and I had people questioning me, well, it's okay if you're just going to do that. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I knew the whole end game in terms of what they were doing. We need to become organized in terms of that. We need to start communicating with each other. We need to understand that we need to help each other as part of doing that. There's no coincidence that the word community is made up of common unity. We must drive that. We, the community, us, all of you have a part to play. I'm only as good as what you guys do on the ground, as part of what it is. My job's the easy bit. I get to deal with all the boring stuff. You guys get to jump around and do cool stuff and make videos. I deal with boring stuff, but I enjoy the boring stuff in terms of that. That's where my skill set's at. I want to help you, help us make sure we protect what is ours, the cultural identity of what is ours. We did this. Fig didn't do that. We did this. And we've got to protect that. So if you can do one thing as parkour, you've got to start talking to each other. Go past the badges, past the teams. Go past all of that. You've got to start talking to each other.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm going to press. So specifically, what do you want people to do? Like, is it social media sharing? Is it go right? Is it United States get organized so we can participate? Like,
absolutely, yeah. So in terms of the Parkour Earth bit, you must become organized. So if people want a voice at the table, you must become organized. So you must come together as groups, individual groups, federate to form a national federation. Give plurality to your voice in terms of that. Good governance will give you the framework to do that. But unless you've got enough people around the table from different walks or different types, different disciplines, the ADD, the parkour, the freerunning, the pro lot, the non-pro lot, the purists, the non-purists, the pros, the athlete, whatever you want to call them, you need all of those people around the table to have that voice. If you don't have plurality, if everybody's thinking the same, then no one's thinking. You must have debate. And that's what Parkour Earth and the National Federation should do, is provide the forum for debate to happen and for a consensus to be reached. Now that consensus isn't set in stone. Once the consensus is reached, you review that and you keep going. You change that. As with any government or any governmental organization or any governance sort of system, there should be that constant review of that. Sometimes you go left when you should have gone right. But as long as you can acknowledge that and do a U-turn and come back and change, that's what it's about.
So we have 2 similar questions, so I'm kind of going to smash them together. So one concern that I think everybody would agree on is if you have this single representation happening from one country, you're sort of requiring that to match. So the trickers, the freerunners, the ADD, like you have vastly different takes on the practice. And how do we deal with, we being Parkour, how do we deal with the fact that it's going to be really difficult to get like a single voice, not necessarily one human, but a single voice from each nation? How do we resolve that? Is there a way that we can deal with those differing voices? Yeah,
but diversity is a strength. A lot of people look that if we've got debate happening at a national level, and John can tell us, John's from Scotland, so John's Access Parkour, who's a member of Parkour UK. So there's things that happen even in the UK community in terms of that people don't agree with.
Do you guys have a single rep? So another one of the questions is, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, do you remember the 6 entities? Like that formed the Accord?
Yes.
6, okay. Do you happen to know who the individual people were?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You wanna, like, spout them off? 'Cause one of the questions is like, name the humans who were.
Name of humans, well, most of them are on the website in terms of that. So there's Parkour UK in terms of that. Parkour UK does not hold a directorship or have board representation on Parkour Earth. So I'm in an ex officioso position. That means I'm the administrator. I do this stuff. Hence my thing. I'm not cuffed and tethered to my desk as opposed to being outdoors and doing something. Then you've got Stuart McInnes, who's the independent chair. So he's an arbitrator and international sports lawyer. Dr. Belinda Wheaton, some of you may or may not know, works in the lifestyle sports space, based out in University of Waikato, wrote a number of reports for the IOC and still does an awful lot of bits with that. You're right, that is my website. I meant who are the people from the actual national federated entities that formed the Accord? So like who represented? No, you're confusing separate things now. So in terms of national federation, so in terms of the Parkour UK process, it was something that the Accord was there was a suggestion. I had to take it to board. I had to get agreement from my board. They scrutinized, challenged me in terms of what I was doing. Once I got agreement from board said you need to take it to membership. So we had to take it to our AGM, and it was up to the members. Members had their free vote on it. So if members said no, we couldn't do it. Members said yes, it was unanimous. So we joined. In terms of the other 6, it's down to them with their processes and procedures and what they do. That's why in the founding statement that Parkour Earth put out, it would either have gone to their boards, their communities, or their membership. In Parkour UK's case, all 3. Federation du Parkour, they've got their separate process. South Africa, New Zealand, they've all got their own process. So there isn't individuals, and that's the key thing to point out. So the 6 founding members, if you like, are national federations. They're not individuals as part of that. But the 6 that were involved, it was obviously the people that were forming the Accord, if you like, and then taking it back to those was myself, Damien Puddle, Elliot Duffy, Sacha Lemaire from France. Who else we got? Thomas from Poland. Who have I missed? There's one more.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
So yeah. But yeah, they're representatives from the national federations.
Are those names also listed in the statement? This is weird.
Yeah, so the only one that's not.
Keep doing it. All of a sudden I'm like, what?
So the only one that's not listed on the website is Thomas from Poland, because he hasn't got a board position, if you like, and that went through a voting process as well.
All right, let's go. I mean, like, these are all great questions. Let's turn left and go completely different direction. I'll correct the spelling error. What happens to parkour if Feig wins and takes it into the Olympics?
Doomsday. Well, doomsday scenario. The zombie apocalypse. That's what happens. Well, in short, we all turn into gymnasts. That's if you're looking at those of you that follow me on social media, not that I expect anybody to, it's random ramblings. I posted up a piece today around skateboarding and what's gone on in the skateboarding piece. So there is no International Skateboard Federation, World Skateboard Federation. They've merged and done all the other bits and pieces. But basically now it's all under one body, which used to be FIRS, or Federation Internationale de Roller Sports, all mashed together now called World Skate. Problem is they're holding their World Championships in a couple of weeks' time. Out of the 10 disciplines they're running, one of them's skateboarding. So that's the dilution of what happens in terms of what you do. Plus then if you want to forward 10, 15 years' time, you have children growing up wrongly thinking, we was always part of gymnastics. You ask a child that does snowboarding now, they would wrongly assume it's always been part of skiing, or it was. Culturally, it was part of skiing. It wasn't. Same with BMX. BMX was never part of cycling, but it was taken into the Olympics under the auspices of the UCI. And again, a lot of this stuff that is happening isn't unique. It isn't a parkour versus gymnastics situation. Same as you've alluded to earlier with stand-up paddleboarding. That's been fought over by canoeing, who say, well, you use a paddle, it's ours. Surfing, saying you stand up on it, it's ours. So you've got this, and it's all being driven by Agenda 2020. You also referenced obstacle course racing as part of that. They are, as far as I know, and the connections that I have, they are actively in discussions with modern pentathlon in terms of that sort of level. That's their choice. If that's what their community choose to do, that's fine. What they've got to realize is you will have a complete loss of sovereignty. You cannot set up a commission and have autonomy. The two are incompatible. So what Figure's saying on one hand, we're going to have a commission to run the parkour competitions. How can you have autonomy inside another structure that has the downwards pressure on you in terms of that? You can't. And fundamentally, it's around the recognition that parkour isn't gymnastics. You know, it's just not gymnastics. You've only got to look around the room in here. It's not gymnastics in terms of that. You know, coach, who wants to be wearing spandex and bouncing around on a floor on foam mats? None of us really want to be doing that as part of that. Now, if you look at even gymnastics' own history in terms of what they've wedged into their own sport, they've got a number of disciplines that wasn't theirs. But they promised that they would bring them in. Double tramp or aerobic gymnastics, just to name two. You said earlier they got 7 disciplines as part of that. Also, then if you look at the bigger picture around gymnastics, they were founded on an altruistic basis like us, that they would be non-competitive. Out of those 7 disciplines, arguably one of them is non-competitive. And that's their smallest representation in terms of what they do. So there's lots that can happen. Then if you look at it at an international level, it all transposes down to a national level in terms of that. You know, it can become politically fraught in terms of how that plays out. So for us in the UK, all of a sudden we could have a situation, we've already had this discussion with our Elite Sports Council UK Sport. If FIG do win out, who is UK Sport going to fund to put the athletes into medal potential? Are they going to go and speak to British Gymnastics, or are they going to speak to us?
You want to go to gymnastics.
Yeah, so that's just a small thing. Then there's all things around insurance, coaching qualifications, various other bits, you know, representation. How does that all do, you know, in terms of that? We can lose what is essentially ours, what we created.
So 2 fun ones. Well, 1 fun one. What's you to take on this role? Why parkour?
Why? I don't know. If I'm honest, some days I don't know. There's an awful lot of stress involved in this sort of work that I'm in, but I work in sport. It's my choice. It's my choice. So I work in sport generally. The reason I got involved in parkour many, many years ago is because I work in sports development, and a lot of people don't know that, or what it is or what it means. Don't ask me to explain it because nobody ever gets it as part of that. My parents, they still don't know what I do. They can't really get their head around what it is. When I saw parkour for the first time, for me it was the first thing to go, you can actually take something off what you've seen off a TV that people go, ooh, wow, for about half an hour, and then switch it off, never think anything about it, to creating that into a full-blown sport. That's true sports development in terms of doing that. So for me it was that real opportunity, but it also allowed me to articulate a lot of the frustrations I have with the sporting landscape. In terms of that, you know, 2 very quick things. One is the no ball games culture. So in the UK, there's signs everywhere, every patch of grass, whatever it is, there's signs that say no ball games. Basically, no football, no cricket, no basketball, table tennis, whatever. And most sports, to a great less extent, involve a ball with that. That has now transcended into things like no cycling, no rollerblading, and the latest ones, no parkour, no free running, even no jumping. Yes. Yeah, so you have... So no fun at all. Don't do anything. Just be submissive to your So parkour allowed me to really challenge that in a professional sort of landscape as part of that, and then it just sort of mushroomed into this bigger thing. And I've been in the governance space and the sports development space for a long time around that. So when this stuff sort of happened, and what most people don't know is that we had a very similar issue, and to a much lesser extent now, we have an issue with British Gymnastics encroaching on our space in the UK. In terms of that, we had to tackle that, but at the same time, it's going through recognition. So all the stuff that we've done with Parkour Earth very publicly, Parkour UK did very privately with British Gymnastics, because we had the same issue.
That is a more immediate concern here in the States, is the US Gymnastics Association, which actually operates within our infrastructure and our laws and is what's rubber stamping the gyms. I think that's the entity that the individual gym owner, the individual practitioner would run up against first, rather like FIG is knocking on the door and saying, you're not teaching Olympic gymnastics, it's going to be the local gym next to you that's teaching USA Gymnastics branded gymnastics is the one that would And I haven't looked into that to see like, well, what would they actually, you know, do they sue you? Do they come, like, how does that work? But to me, it's that national level entity, which is where the U.S. is still completely undefended, unorganized, unprotected, however you want to put that. So that's a very important point.
Yeah, it's still happening.
You're already seeing
Yeah,
that in the
it's
UK.
still
By
happening.
the way, we already had it down.
And then the irony is you've got British Gymnastics now licensing what they've created called freestyle gymnastics to someone like Australia. So they're now putting the 3G model in place. Yes,
Does everybody know about that? The 3G is, there's a thing called freestyle gymnastics, and it
looks like, smells like, tastes like parkour, but
no, it doesn't look like, smell like, or taste like.
no.
But yeah, it's like these. It's basically the gymnasts got sick of having rules, so they do freestyle gymnastics, but there are rules. And I don't know how it wound up down under, but somehow they like exported it because it wasn't doing well enough in the UK. So that to me would be like the danger of the gymnastics and MuvMag coming in. But the other side of that coin, I don't want to name names, but other people who aren't here, somebody who runs a community said to me, well, I don't care, like I'm outside, I'm training, like well, the gymnasts are inside, they're never going to show up. And his point was that he felt that the people, it was a different pool of people, and it was kind of like, I don't have time for this. And I tend to disagree. I think that it does matter where the line gets drawn, and that it's clear that gymnastics people are like, trying to reach over the line, because we're disorganized. So gymnastics wasn't organized hundreds of years ago either, and it's turned into this giant juggernaut of TV and advertising and gym spaces and stuff.
Yeah.
Even if I don't run it, by the way, I don't run a parkour community. I don't make any money on the podcast, so I don't have a dog in the race from education and teaching point of view. But I think that if you're running a gym, don't be thinking, well, the kids who are at the gymnastics center aren't going to be my students anyway, because it doesn't really work like that. If that gymnastics center will get bigger, and then they'll look at your students and be like, hey, can we get the national entity to send the nasty gram letter to challenge you on some nuance or something, or worse, push through some sort of national organization that sets up rules. I used to study Aikido, and Aikido is organized under Judo in France. Makes no sense. You want to teach a Japanese martial art, you need a Judo license, just because they lost the war. And before they were paying attention, Judo snapped up the organization, and then they passed a law, and now you cannot teach unrelated item X unless you get a license from Y, and of course it's political, good luck with that. So at the moment, it seems completely harmless to have the gym down the street doing USA branded gymnastics, but gymnastics is big, and we all know about lobbying, so the fear would be that they'd be able to do something in that realm. Let's go down the route of, and I think I know the answer to this, but let's do it explicitly. Does Parkour Earth have anything that, in particular, that they want to regulate from the top down?
Again, it's a preloaded question, so Parkour Earth doesn't want to do anything. Parkour Earth wants to provide a framework for national federations to come together to debate, discuss, and decide as part of that.
So the Congress would have to get together and do something crazy, like decide that we all have to wear a certain brand of shoe, push that down from the top, but good luck.
Yes, yeah, in short. So there's no prerequisites, there's no sort of hidden agenda as part of that. What we're trying to do is get the framework in place, which we've done, on board national federations, support those communities that want support in terms of establishing a national federation, in terms of doing that, and then onboarding them so that they can become part of that global picture. So then we can take the decisions as part of that, so they're not taken for us by an unrelated third party. I can't stress enough, FIG are doing this. Regardless why we're sat in this room, things are still happening. They are still going on.
That's a good way.
If I could just slightly reword that, where do you expect the remit of Parkour Earth to go, and which areas do you expect Parkour Earth to leave alone?
I need more specifics than...
Repeat the question when he gets it organized. So
Okay.
Oh, good.
Like it good.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure he repeats the question, because the
Okay.
mic won't hear you.
In terms of qualifications, in terms of the governance, what do you expect the governance to look like? We're probably not expecting to see uniforms. We might see some working competition. We'll probably, hopefully, see something in terms of insurance and qualification standards. Where do you see it going?
In terms of certification straight away, it's a long-winded question.
Hook it down.
Put it in. So in terms of what Parkour Earth has already said that it's not going to do, so one of the things, qualifications, absolutely won't get in. One of the things that we've put in there, unless members change it, is that we recognise that non-standard practice is a strength of ours. So if people do things differently here in the States than what they do in the UK or in Gambia or Brazil, it's cool. That's part of the diversity and the beauty and the strengths of our community. It shouldn't be for some people or 12 people sat in a room deciding what something should look like globally. Plus, you just can't do that in terms of that. There's so many different regulations around different things in terms of countries. I know that from a UK perspective. We are a nation of nations, similar to the States in terms of that. So we have 4 in the Union, and we have a de facto 5th that we've still got to deal with in terms of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, under the Good Friday Agreement. So there's lots within that, and fitting within a framework is difficult. In terms of rules around competitions and bits around that, don't know, because the community hasn't decided, or Parkour Earth hasn't decided that they are going to enter into this. There is provision within the framework, so the framework is there to give us provision to do something. Just because it's in there doesn't mean we are mandated to do it. You know, it doesn't mean we're going to go off and start talking to the IOC and go, right, let's have a conversation. What does it look like?
So let's go like different direction. Parkour Earth gets the mandate, you know, go protect us from the Olympics and feet. What's the actual roadmap look like? What are the next steps, and what would have to happen for us to be able to get control of parkour in the Olympics? What would that control look like?
Don't know. It's a large question in terms of that, because the Olympics are going through a massive state of flux in terms of that. They know that they need to modernise. That's why the transition from Jacques Rogge over to Thomas Bach was completely different in terms of that. So London 2012 was probably the last Olympic Games of that ilk that you will see. Rio was a stepping stone towards Tokyo 2020. Tokyo 2020 will be the new framework of what it looks like. More women, more youth, more urban. It's all around their Agenda 2020. Number of sports are being told that they need to do things fundamentally differently. Well, not just that, they're not even being told that. That's part of the problem. So the IOC have this issue around, they talk a talk around good governance, walk the walk in terms of that. So you've got the whole issue with skateboarding we've spoke about with that. You had the article that I published was Kit McConnell, who's the director of sport at the IOC, talking about he hopes that the skate community will come together behind this and other bits and pieces. You know, Tokyo 2020 is on the horizon. They haven't even got the format sorted for what the competition's going to look like. So there's fundamental issues. Then you've got other sports which are, if you like, and I use this term very loosely, innovating. So someone like FIBA for basketball have proposed 3-on-3. 3-on-3 has been around for they dot, you know, in terms of that. More women, more youth, more urban, yes. Then if you look at that from a host city point of view, I haven't got to build a stadium to put the basketball in. I can build a plaza on a street corner and do all other bits. So they adopt the beach volleyball concept, the pop-up arena type bit.
So what's the next action for Parkour Earth if it's going to actually stop feet? Like, is it the SIGA membership? Is it SIGA membership? It's
multifaceted in terms of that. So what is happening, particularly with us, is the sporting community aren't quite aware of what's going on. It's starting to get out now. Bearing in mind it started in February. Right. We're virtually in October. So it's only starting to penetrate the bigger sporting system now with that. And even then, you're talking about a system that is completely self-serving in terms of that. So you're not only trying to deal with the fig issue, you're trying to break the system in terms of that to get the system to recognise. If you want things like this in, and you've only got to look at the IOC report, which I put out. The IOC report was looking at how do we get more lifestyle and action sports into the Olympic Games. 167-page report, written predominantly by Belinda Wheaton, who's on our board, and Dr. Holly Thorpe wrote that board down to three key recommendations. You know, basically, if you want them in, deal with the national federations that are doing that, or the international federations doing that. Don't go to a cycling and say, can you bring BMX in for us? It doesn't work, because you have that cultural schism that happens with it in terms of that, and you lose the whole identity and ultimately the authenticity as part of that. So for us, the Olympics is part of the equation, but it's not the sole driver in terms of that. FIG is the main driver for us, but it's not the whole situation, because you've got to influence the whole sporting system. So yes, we are actively talking to the IOC. We're in active dialogue with them around the governance issues around that and the encroachment that FIG are taking. We're talking to CAS, we're talking to WADA, we're talking to all of the sporting institutions in and around that, because this is a big issue in terms of that.
So far may actually be enough to pause the issue for the moment. If I understand correctly, the IOC has a rule of 40, you need 40 nations to,
no.
They want to see a unified sport?
No, so again, people, if you're not in the sporting system, things could be presented in a way which are misleading. So,
No, we have lots of time.
Yeah. So in terms of that, the IOC are the ones that provide recognition So they can recognize you as an Olympic sport as terms of that. What they can also do is bring you in as part of, as an Olympic sport and then put you on the Olympic program. All three are three separate things. So there's IOC recognition, there's becoming an Olympic sport and being on the Olympic program. Different things, all completely different things. To get there,
And
what you're talking about, the 40 national federations.
Where would you put FIG on that? Like which of those?
So FIG are already in.
FIG,
Figure in, they're part of the IOC system.
right.
They're
And
recognised.
They're already in the program.
They're already in the program, the other bits. So
they
part
can
of the stuff that they were,
track it in the back door if they can call it the 8th discipline.
that's what they were trying to do. So they held an executive committee in June or July, I think it was, the IOC. Part of the lobbying that Parkour UK did behind the scenes quite directly, and we went straight to the executive committee as well to say that this is an issue because FIG were proposing parkour in the 2020 games. You know, and what a lot of people aren't reporting as well, we spoke about the discourse in the parkour community around the actions of FIG. Equally, the same is happening in the gymnastics community, but no one's reporting on it. Gymnasts are bemused by this, going, well, that's theirs, that's parkour, that's nothing to do with gymnastics in terms of doing that. You've got that with them. Then there's fundamental questions around that. Their own constitution prohibits them from doing this. They haven't got the mandate to go and do it.
Right.
So they're taking it to their Congress next year to try and get retrospective approval to do all of this. Plus then they're spending their members, national federations' money on doing this.
Finite resources.
Yeah. So you've got questions from the gymnastics community. Why are you spending our money on developing someone else's sport? In terms of that. Just going back to your 40 national federations thing,
Yeah,
that's,
where does that come from?
that's a requirement for membership for GAISF, or the Global Association of International Sports Federations. Formerly known as Sport Accord. It's not just a name change. They have changed massively in terms of their remit, in terms of what they do.
What does GAISF access gain? It gets you if you.
It gives you membership. All you can do is get membership of that organisation. It doesn't give you anything other than that. Under its old remit of Sport Accord, and it's changed, its constitution's changed completely in terms of what they're doing. One of the key things that they require you to do for membership is, yes, you've got to have 40 national federations, etc. That's bearing in mind, even if you want to apply for membership
But why do
as
I
part of
want
that.
to be in GAISF? Like, what does it get you?
It gets you membership. That's
Why
it.
does
It doesn't
everybody else
grant
say?
recognition.
Okay.
Don't know. You need to raise those questions as part of that. Then also, it is, when I say highly unlikely that any organisation representing parkour will gain membership of GISF because they have a rivalry clause as part of that. So you need to demonstrate as the applicant that you don't have rivalry with any other member in membership of GISF. Who's a member of GISF? FIG. Who approves membership applications? It goes to their Congress. Who's going to veto it?
FIG.
Yes. This is why, and give you a practical example of this working, this is exactly why the International Skateboard Federation merged with FIRS to bypass that whole system as part of that. Because International Skateboard Federation could never get membership of Sport Accord or GAISF.
Just by mucking up the water enough to prevent FIG from being able to drag us in there, and we could actually avoid being in the Olympics altogether if we organize and then resist. And just every time somebody says, well, in order to bring that sport in, you need unity, and then if we were organized enough to say, no, we disagree with what the left hand is saying, then we could actually stave off the entrance that way.
Well, GAISF is a membership organisation. That's all it is in terms of that. Yes, they have a strong partnership with the IOC because they represent the collective voice of all the international federations that the IOC work with. So you're going to have that sort of synergy there.
All right. You personally, do you feel that parkour should be in the Olympics? Excellent question. So the Olympics have a strong history of causing socioeconomic issues in host cities. So that's like a conflict of interest between the Olympics come to town and the ramifications of that and what parkour and ADD, we're just going to leave it, what parkour and ADD have said. You could just leave it. Just tuck it in, it'll be fine. Ta-da! So do you personally feel that we should be in the Olympics as parkour as a sport?
As my personal, and this is genuine, my personal thing is it should be the community to decide. It's not for me to decide. I'm a bureaucrat, technocrat, whatever you want to call to me as. I'm a guy behind a desk. In terms of that, it's up to the community to decide. I think one of the things that we have, a point that we have got to now.
Parkour Earth is actually maneuvering or acting in a direction to stalwart FIG, right?
Yes.
Okay, so where did that mandate come from within Parkour Earth? I'm not saying that you snuck it.
Where did that come from? Very clearly, the common unity was out there. There was over 20 odd letters that were issued by national federations or national communities.
Those letters aren't actually tied into the concept. Like you're saying, it came from the 6 current members.
Was the 6,
those
yes.
6 entities.
Yeah.
So that goes back to the people who run the French Federation, the people who run.
No, it comes from those communities. It's not the people that run it, it's the
But I mean,
communities
they
in terms
had
of
to,
that.
They had to have like heard it from the community, write the actual
Absolutely, yeah.
thing, and then
Yeah.
pass that in. So
Yeah, if you look at the timeline of these letters being issued, it's no coincidence. You know, Parkour UK got recognition or the announcement of recognition, I should say, was made in January. Within 4 or 5 weeks, FIG were announcing they're going to run parkour as a discipline of theirs. So it's no coincidence those two things are linked. Then if you look at their announcement in February and Parkour UK issuing the first letter on the 31st of March, it took months before other organisations or other national federations or national communities started issuing letters in terms of that. Months in terms of that, because there was lots of dialogue behind the scenes, people to unpick and unpack this in terms of the complexities, the politics that sits behind it, the ramifications, et cetera, in terms of that. So there's still letters feeding.
dripping in.
Yeah, in terms of that. So those things come out. But in terms of the FIG thing, it's very clear. It's not the primary purpose Parkour Earth was set up. But if you look at one of the founding principles to protect the sovereignty and integrity of the sporting thing, we can't allow, it would be a dereliction of duty of an international federation to idly stand by and allow someone to do this. That's why we are very vocal in this space, and we're doing things above the line and below the line on various different things on this.
I think I have 4 variations of this question now. In the end, so I don't know, I'm American. Is this an American-only thing? We're, like everybody, the 4 questions are all about diversity. So we have a big variance in how we teach parkour, what we think of it, how we see it. Like we are not unified here. And quite honestly, that's probably a good thing. So from the point of view of helping us or consulting with us for national organizational levels, just setting PD aside for a second, from your personal experience and what you've seen with Parkour UK, how do we go about resolving all of those splinters?
Well, you need the framework first and foremost. You need a forum in which that space, which that debate can happen in terms of that. Primarily that can be driven by good governance. If you set up an organization that is open, transparent, democratic, and is plural as part of that, then you can have that debate. You're not always going to agree, but you will get to a point of common consensus in terms of that, and you can move forward on that basis incrementally in terms of that.
Just in this room, we're going to get to like, our version of consensus is 5 opinions or 4.5 opinions, and then we would basically be required to cook that down into one unified voice to take our participation then into Parkour Earth. So that seems to be a really difficult thing to separate. Like how,
It is, but if you can translate those things upwards in terms of that, so that the voice from America, if you like, then translates that into a Parkour Earth sphere, and I can tell you, there's no 100% synergy between what we do and what the Australians do, or what the South Africans do, etc. etc. You can't do that, but we have that debate, but we're mature enough to understand that to move forwards, you have to reach a point of consensus in terms of that. You can't debate and discuss every dot and every line on the T. You can't do that, because as I've said earlier, this is happening to us. While we are sat in this room, this is happening to us. And the more FIG see the fractured community that is happening out there. There was an article done by Around the Rings, if anybody has read it or not, but it was talking about why we're debating this. They're just going off and continue doing what they're doing in terms of that.
Some of these questions I'm going to set down because they're related to good governance issues, which I think you can cover on Saturday. So hopefully some of these governance questions you can get to ask directly. Parkour Earth's mission statement's on the website. Yeah, we did regulation.
Important questions.
You wade through them. Yeah, there are a couple questions in here that I've been trying to set down that are about questions like, how does Parkour Earth affect the individual practitioners and communities? And the answer is it doesn't.
It doesn't. It's an important point on that. So one of the big things that we've built into the Constitution is the right of autonomy. Parkour Earth is not there to dictate. It's there to unify and amplify in terms of what national federations do. So we don't impose anything as part of that.
It's like a horrible game of memory. In a non-controversial direction here, what other USA sports federations do we need to be watching? Like, do we need to actually worry about American Ninja Warrior, for example, actually getting organized enough to turn into something that could become a challenge to running a parkour gym? Do you see any other, like okay, so you see FIG coming, but is there anything else you see on the horizon?
Currently, I can't see how you can put something like Ninja Warrior as a sport in its own right in terms of that. Does it present a threat, opportunity, a threat? It's totally up to you. So for instance, in the UK, a lot of people participate in Ninja Warrior UK and they go on TV and they do the other bits and pieces and they do all the bits on there. It doesn't present any current threat to what people are doing. It's got its own type of viewer in terms of that. So I don't know how it's presented here, but certainly in the UK it's part slapstick, part sport type thing. So you have this sort of Saturday night viewing where people get wet and fall in and all the other bits and pieces. So I don't see that as a threat, but that's more akin to something like obstacle course racing, which is completely distinct to what we do.
Are there any, no, this is a very good question to ask you, but are there any USA sports federations that you know of that would be good federation examples? Not necessarily for us to follow, but one that we could look at and dissect and say this was their community, it was split in 3 pieces, and then they unified, here's their federation, that led them to, do you know of any good examples?
Don't know is the short answer. The States is an odd one because it doesn't have a centralized system or a federal system for sport with that. So in the UK, ours is highly complex in terms of that because we've got the 5 home nations, we've got a government department that has most responsibility but not all responsibility for sports. We have to deal with 4 or 5 different governmental departments as part of that. So it's completely regulated in a completely different way in the UK. Then even somewhere like in France, France has a sports ministry as part of that, but they don't have the same recognition procedures that we have because they have the French Sports Ministry and their NOC as part of that. They're the 2 that really look after it. So it varies from country to country to country to country massively in terms of that. Yeah. Yes, yeah. But it's also worth noting things like, and most of you in the States, if I'm telling you to suck eggs, you probably know this, but things like the NBA, NFL, NHL, they're not national federations. They're franchises as part of that. But people outside of the States look inwardly and go, well, the NBA is the National Federation for Basketball. It's not.
So there are a couple questions in here that are kind of reiterating, and not that they've been sending them in, but like I have a stack. A couple questions that are reiterating, I think, the valid concern about the top-down dictation of rules and regulations.
Yeah.
But I think there's a real danger for if the U.S. has one unit of representation and the European Union decides to, oh, we're going to do this, then we would suddenly wind up with some directive that comes down from Parkour Earth because we got outvoted. And I think that whoever was asking that question about what's stopping, if anything, Parkour Earth from becoming a busybody and issuing international, that's not a word, international regulations associated. So what's stopping PE from becoming a busybody and issuing international regulations associated with coaching, competition, park and gym design and stuff like that? And the answer is it doesn't do anything that it isn't mandated to do by its concept.
No, but it's very clear if you read the Constitution, sorry, who put that in if they want to declare it? So if you read the Constitution, there's a whole section on autonomy which basically says Parkour Earth will never interfere with national matters unless it is called to do so, or if there is a dispute between 2 national federations. So for instance, if France and Germany don't get on and they've got an issue, we will intervene. But it's not about that. We would never impose things downwards as part of it.
Potentially like a national organization that could potentially do that.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, you're thinking.
So the national federation
It might not necessarily be from the international level.
Yes.
It could be from the national level.
Right.
Yes. So if it comes,
I think the bigger danger is from national level.
Right.
yes. And then if there's an issue at national level, if Parkour Earth are called to arbitrate on that, we can do that. Again, that's within the Constitution as part of that. Yeah. Ultimately, we want a bottom-up organisation because the people that are really important are the practitioners. It's not me. I sit behind a desk doing rubbish, firing off open letters most of the time. So
Just to check the clock, we have at least 5 minutes, but I think it's safe to go 10 over. I purposely went as short as I could, and there's time packed on the end. So let's go at least, let's say we go to 10 after for sure, so another 15 minutes. I'm still holding some questions, but I think we've touched on most of them. Am I holding any questions that I have completely ignored?
So I feel like we've all been avoiding the idea of fake taking over parkour, right? But with some of the sports that you brought up, like skateboarding and snowboarding, after the dust settles and people are obviously not wanting to be absorbed, how do those sports act? Is it a net positive at the end of it? Is it a net negative? not saying that FIG is necessarily the place for us to go, or that even like absorption is, but you know, is skateboarding better off afterwards? I'm not super intimate on knowing what happens there, but was it the right choice for them? You know, even though it's like not as legitimate, is that why like there's millionaire skateboarders now?
Yes. Skateboarding is way too early to say in terms of that. It was very clear the IOC wanted it in, so they took it in terms of doing that. They had an odd situation because they had three sort of, international federations. You had World Skate, you had International Skate, and you had FIRS, who were already recognised as part of that. There was this debate for a long time around ISF, WSF, and it went round and round and round in terms of that. And now they've gone in with FIRS and re-merged as part of that. Part of the concern in the article that I retweeted today from Inside the Games is around there is concern already that a lot of the top skateboarders are just not going to compete and they're not going to go there because they don't see it as theirs. Plus the organisation that they've gone into, it's now a commission. Yeah. So the exact model that FIG are proposing for us as part of that, having this commission that looks after that. So it's Gary Ream that looks after the commission. The guy that used to head up the International Skateboard Federation is now in the World Skate in terms of doing that. But there's so much ambiguity around it. So the problem is with the skate, it's just way too early to tell. It's probably going to be 2 or 3 Olympic cycles before it all comes out in the wash as part of that. But if you look at things like snowboarding is a prime example. It went through various things, and there's still a massive split in the community that people go, I'm just not competing. It's not, FIS is not, or Federation de Ski is not my, it doesn't represent me, it doesn't what I do. And this plays out even with established sports. So divers are referred to as swimmers as part of that, but they don't, you speak to a diver, say I'm a diver in terms of doing that. So you even have these schisms within the sport. What I would suggest you do is speak to people that were upset by FIG, so people like Double Tramp or aerobic gymnastics and others, speak to those and see what they say. Because the conversations I've had and what I've heard is that they promised us the world. They told us we was going into the Olympics in terms of that. Nothing's transpired as part of that. And then you get this downward trend. So in the UK, London 2012 was the first time BMX was put in. The GB team there had a massive split in terms of that, and that is still going on around. We're BMXers, we're not cyclists, and you're trying to put us in this very moribund, very straitjacket organisation that just does not understand us because they deal with people in Leica that go round and round in circles or on a road track. You're talking about kids that wear fundamentally different things. Yes, other sports have evolved. If you look at FIS or Federation de Ski in the Sochi Winter Olympics, allowed for the first time for their people to wear different things, branded stuff, all the different sort of bits and pieces. With that, so it's still way too early, but there are lessons out there, particularly BMX and snowboarding. They're both similar sort of lifestyle sports in terms of that.
I was just looking at it, does it always have to be looked at as like a fully evil thing? Like is it a destruction sport, or are there more benefits to it?
In short, no, but the question is, and this is the primary thing that Parkour UK put out, now Parkour Earth is saying, we have the right to self-determination. Right. So so the point bit around the obstacle course racing community, if they want to have active discussions with modern pentathlon and say we want to be a discipline of yours, that's their choice to do that. It's totally choice to do it. But we've had an unrelated third party just go, we're going to do this, regardless of what you say. Even the significant discourse that we've put out there, and they've come out and said there's only a few people that disagree with this. It's like, this is madness.
I couldn't resist.
It's in terms of that, the whole, even the media and people around it, when you explain it to them, they just start to unpick this and go, this is crazy. I did an interview on a podcast with a German paper on Thursday. Sandra, her name was. So she contacted me, and so we just started unpacking things. She's a gymnastics reporter and came back, and she came from that angle. Well, you could do this, blah, blah, blah. And then by the end of the conversation, she was like, yeah, this is just madness.
So, it's the joke about it. I have one question for you in 37 parts. I'm not going to do all these parts right out of the gate, but one of them is, we didn't really talk about this at all, is coaching certification. So shall we attempt to form a single coaching certification that coaches are required to complete? So somehow the United States all get together, we decide that we're all going to come up with a minimum coaching standard. Should we do that? And if we did it, would that give us any additional leverage against FIG? So instead of trying to fight them on their own terms, if we were unified at a coaching level, do you think that would give us a tactical advantage?
Are you talking international or national or both?
National, I'm talking national level.
National level, in short, it's up to the national federation to decide what that is, whether they recognise one or more. That's totally up to them. Or if they have a centralised way of doing it. At an international federation level, absolutely not. There's no way that should happen. And even if membership put that forward, I would purposefully state that you shouldn't be doing that, because it's not for an international federation to downward dictate what that looks like. However, what can happen is you can have core modules, if you like, if you say, so here's a module on the history of parkour, so that you get some consistency in terms of what is put out there in terms of that. That's a suggestion, that's not anything with that. Ultimately, it's up to national federations to do that.
I agree with what you're saying, but I think I'm interpreting this question more along the lines of, the example I like to give is, if you want to go teach parkour in a school because you're passionate about physical education, but you're also passionate about parkour, and you see an opening for a PE instructor at your local middle school, and you send your resume and you send your CV in, and right now there's no like fancy acronym that indicates you are a real parkour instructor. So it's up to the school board to actually evaluate your CV and make a decision. So the way I was interpreting this question was, if we magically came up with a single unified parkour certification system, so now there's the magic ABC stamp, and everybody in the United States knows that's the stamp that you need. Would that sort of unity in like a licensing from one particular coaching entity, do you think that would be enough to ward off gymnastics when they come around?
Not necessarily, but it gives you strength in terms of that. And it also gives you what's called occupational competency recognition in terms of that. So if you have proprietary coaching certifications, not qualifications, because they're two completely different things, and there's lots of proprietary different certifications out there, it's the equivalent of me saying, well, you can teach my Zumba class because I'm the Zumba franchise, here you go and do it. The problem is, at a national or state level, when you go into that PE department, they're going to go, what does this mean? Are you competent to do what you do? Now in the UK, we're fortunate enough to have a centralised national qualification system. Yeah, in terms of that. So, and then we work with governmental departments, both the Department for Education and then the representative bodies. So there's an overarching body called the Association for Physical Education, and then you have home country one. So we was talking about it earlier about SAPP. So we deal with those organisations and go in and say, these are the standards. If schools are looking to bring in parkour coaches or instructors, this is what they should be looking for.
That question out.
Sorry,
No, that's cool. How many people actually work in primary education, like where you actually need to jump through the hoop of like getting a background check, and like, do we have enough people to actually hold this? Okay, so my question is, because I don't know Dilly about getting a job in a school. If you want to go into the school and teach PE and teach parkour, what hoop do you have to actually jump through? There's probably like, is there like a background check hoop? Is it different from a tennis coach? Like, is there any difference in tennis, or it's just totally up to the school board to make a decision? Okay,
so in the UK,
what I'm getting at is, if there was magical unity, and I think this is not a good idea, and I'll tell you why in a second. But if there was magical unity that suddenly everybody started realizing there was one rubber stamp, then they would be vetting these applications from teachers. Yeah. I personally feel that the fact that the United States has a variety of high-quality certification programs is an awesome thing. If I was hiring people to teach in my gym, like a gymnastics center, or in my school, I'd be looking for the CV that had like, oh my God, this guy went here and did a 6-month intern with this person, then he went here and did this thing, then he did that thing, then he went and got his NASM, just hire this person. Like, so I would think it would be a loss if we whittled it down to one. Yeah,
ultimately it's down to the national federation, but if you look at it from the opposite end of the telescope, if you've got even one or more that are recognised by a national federation, that gives a different level in terms of proprietary coaching stuff. If you say something is recognised by, it gives you different things.
Parkour UK rubber stamp except whatever, recognize any other ones other than the PK General?
No PK Gen, so we have our own and have had our own coaching qualifications since 2010.
Right, for ADAPT, is that what you're...
No. So the Parkour UK First for Sport Level 1 award in coaching parkour freerun. It's a mouthful, yes. Same with the Level 2, we've always had that, it's always been separate. Then we do CPD for coaches and other bits and pieces. What that then also enables us to do is prove that someone is occupationally competent in the sports coaching space in terms of that. So it's regulated by a government or department called Ofqual. We have to deal with UK Coaching, or formerly Sports Coach UK. We have to deal with all the standards around that. So we've got some bits of the qualifications which aren't ours because that's dictated by occupational competence. And then bits is the technical competence. That's our bit, that's our remit, that's what we do.
See, we have none of that. We have no, in the federal, we have none of those structures.
You will have an occupational competency of some stretch. So we have it for every industry in the UK. So for instance, a scaffolder in the UK has to prove that they're occupationally competent to get a coach to do it. Even down to security guards to get the badge that you wear on the door, you need to prove that you're occupationally
Do we
competent
have
in terms of that.
in the States? I don't think we have any kind of thing that corresponds. I mean, we have like licensing for engineers and architects, a couple of industries that are
Yeah.
regulated.
Regulated, but if you look at the opposite way,
So
if
we
you've
could
got a
just sit on
system,
our laurels and let the government come in and regulate us too.
you can, but if you do it the opposite way round, the interesting way to look at that is you've got something that is centralised and proves that you're occupational competent. It gives you significant leverage with insurance. So our insurance levels are pittance in terms of that. It doesn't cost much to insure us, our members and our coaches in terms of that. We was having a conversation earlier, you know, a member organisation of ours, to cover the organisation is £500 for the year. That covers you. Coach for the year is £120. And you can coach anywhere, indoors, outdoors, as long as you're doing it in the realms of your qualification, then you can do it. So there's benefits in doing it, but ultimately, from a Parkour Earth perspective, it's down to the National Federation to decide whether they want one, more, none, free market, however they want to do it.
Completely different question, like totally different. Do you think that a for-profit entity can manage, like at a, so I'm thinking at our national level for organization, what would your vision of the entity look like? It would have to be transparent, it would have to be not for
A national federation? National federation, there's many things that should be there as a matter of principle. So it should be non-profit, it should be independent. So you need the good governance bits that's sitting around that to prove that you are, and it should be accountable and transparent.
Independent from, it's not part of NASCAR, it's not like, what do you mean by independent?
So independent means that it must be representative of the members that it serves in terms of that. So you need the yes, well that's the way that it's driven as part of that. So if you look at Parkour UK, we have a dual functionality. So first and foremost, we must provide services to our member organisations. Ultimately, we are there to protect the rights and freedoms of our communities and our practitioners in terms of doing that. So there's lots that we do behind the scene, and I'm doing one of the, hence why I've got to go back Sunday morning. I've got a meeting in Guildford to sort out some issues in terms of some bits there where the businesses are wrongly assuming that people running on their rooftops and causing damage are part of our community. So that, you know, these are things that we have to deal with. We overturn bans, we get signs taken down, we get parkour parks built, etc., stuff like that. So it's multifaceted in terms of that, but that's just what we do as Parkour UK. Ultimately, national federations, it's up to them to decide their remit.
Okay, I think we have like 4, I'm going so like 4 more minutes. Anybody have anything else completely?
Yeah, I want to ask this both to you and Victor, but assuming that your answer to the question, to the offer from IPF to like make a new federation is a no, what is your solution to the problem that having multiple federations can make us weaker against like FIG, for instance?
In terms of, first and foremost, the offer, only because I'm a member of Parkour Research, that's the only time I saw the offer, there's been nothing put directly to Parkour Earth. If that was formally put to Parkour Earth, it'd be for the members of Parkour Earth to debate and decide in terms of doing that.
So the problem comes from that they didn't go through the right channels then, I guess? Is that what you're saying?
No, as far as we're formally concerned, we haven't seen anything. There's been nothing written to Parkour Earth to look at. There was a statement that was made on a Facebook group and already, yes, so it's already in there in terms of doing that.
In order to make that request.
But if you look at an international federation that has got sub-international federations, if you like, so something like the equestrian sort of field has got various different things. It makes things very, very fractured because what you get is disciplines fighting against disciplines in terms of doing that. Who has the loudest voice and who gets taken through? Gymnastics already has this problem. They've got 7 disciplines, 7 communities to deal with as part of that. So you've got everybody going, me, 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 me. What do I want? And then what you've got at the moment is on their executive committee is largely governed by artistic gymnastics. That's why artistic gymnastics rules the roost in terms of what is presented in terms of that, and the other bits come later.
So do you perceive that there's a solution to this, and have you made any effort to reach out to other organizations to make a solution happen?
Parkour Earth's very clear. We've been founded on the principle of national federations, federating and built on good governance as part of that. It's straightforward as part of that.
Let's just do one more.
So I know that you talked about how Parkour Earth is a non-profit organization.
Yep.
Funding has been fairly small at the moment. That means moving forward, if it's going to continue to be volunteer-based largely, it can only grow so large as opposed to what a true overarching governing body can achieve with real revenue, real resources. So what products and services are you uniquely situated to provide that other for-profit businesses can't do that would make you important to the community in a way that also fosters your own business?
Well, first and foremost, you're judging us against existing models of sport in terms of that. So do we have to have shitloads of money going through the bank account? Largely, no. As long as we are serving our founding purpose in terms of what we do for national federations, that's what we're there to do. We should be there protecting the sovereignty, integrity, and the cultural identity of our sport. To do that, yes, we need funds in terms to be able to do that. That largely depends on where we decide to go in terms of that. So we could form partnerships as part of that with commercial organisations or potential sponsors or bits and pieces around that, but that would be debated by national federations in terms of what they want to do. So there isn't this driver that we're trying to chase this golden pot of money at the end of the rainbow somewhere. That just isn't there. First and foremost, it's around protecting what is ours, and then ultimately it's up to us. How do we want to do that? What services would Parkour Earth provide? It's an international independent voice for our sport that people will listen to as part of that. So we can advocate for our communities at a global level in terms of that, because things are highly complex in terms of that. So if you take someone like Belgium, they've got 2 different types of speakers there with it. So some French leaning, some are German leaning in terms of that. So you've got those that sort of come in with that. So it's an odd situation with that. So you've got to deal with the national schisms, if you like, and we've got some of those in the UK in terms of that. So, and then how you represent that and manifest that up at an international level. But it should be this cyclical accountability that comes round in terms of that. The international federation should be accountable to national federations and vice versa in terms of that.
But it would be largely dependent upon donations and upon for-profit businesses.
No, this common misperception. People wrongly assume that because you're a non-profit, you can't make money. You can make money.
That's what I'm asking.
But that money should be reinvested. Yeah, it should be reinvested back into the sport. So ultimately what we would do, any revenues that would come in outside of basic operational costs would be funneled downwards into national federations as part of that. That's what international federations should be doing, but most don't.
Let's call it there for time.
Too busy doing that.
All right, thank you very much, Eugene.